3 miles from St. Thomas in the county of Elgin, became known throughout all Canada in 1895. For years it had stood on the county maps as Wardle's Woods. It was good for squirrels and firewood, and that was about all. But in the closing days of 1894 came a tragedy that caused people to travel for miles simply to tramp through the fragment of forest and gape at the scene of blood. Detective Murray referred to the incident as the Middlemarch Mystery, a mystery he claimed to have solved. On December 14, 1894, John A. Hendershott's 2 farmhands, his nephew Will Hendershott, and his neighbor's son and his wife's cousin William Welter, both aged 24 at the time, went to Wardle's Woods east of St. Thomas to cut wood. Hours later, William Welter showed up at the home of his uncle and neighbor, Charles Welter, to report the accidental death of his companion, killed when the tree they were cutting fell upon him. At first, there was no reason to question Will Welter's story, but subsequent investigation of the accident scene and the suspicions created by the discovery of insurance policies valued at $11,000 on the life of Will Hendershott, with John A. Hendershott as the beneficiary, suggested the need for an inquest. The weight of the Canadian legal establishment was about to descend on unsuspecting John Aaron Hendershott and William David Welter. The fledgling life insurance industry had become inundated with insurance fraud, including murders. They were actively promoting more intense investigation of crimes where insurance payouts were involved. First, the great detective, John Wilson Murray, was summoned from Toronto to St. Thomas to examine evidence pertaining to the supposed accident. Second, Chief Justice Meredith, having just stepped down as leader of the provincial Tories, was chosen to preside over the trial. Last, Britton Bath Ostler, the Crown lawyer responsible for obtaining the conviction that led to the hanging of Louis Riel, was chosen to prosecute. All this legal and political experience aligned against the defense team of 2 small-town barristers, Norman MacDonald and John A. Robinson. Wilson Murray lived up to his billing. The great detective, the inspiration for the CBC production of the Murdoch Mysteries, was dispatched to assist Elgin County Sheriff Dougal Brown. He exhumed the body of the accident victim Will Hendershott and had the head detached for a more in-depth forensic examination by experts. He inspected the accident scene and suggested that the blood was methodically smeared and not splattered on trees and objects. Wilson Murray questioned William Welter's story of how the tree had fallen upon the unsuspecting victim. He uncovered previous attempts by John A. Hendershott to take out life insurance on other locals. On the basis of the unfolding evidence, he charged William David Welter with murder and John Hendershott as his accomplice. John Aaron Hendershott may have believed that at least he might escape conviction, since the evidence was entirely circumstantial. There were similar reported incidents in the press of the day where the perpetrators of insurance murder had escaped justice because the crime could not be proven beyond doubt. This optimism soon evaporated, however, when Chief Justice Meredith delivered an eclectic summary of the importance of circumstantial evidence in proving guilt.
Circumstantial evidence is sufficient if it brings home conviction of guilt to justify a jury in convicting.
Britton Bath Ostler, already a highly regarded Crown attorney, had been asked by John A. MacDonald to help prosecute Louis Riel in Manitoba. By focusing the trial on Riel's ordering of the execution of a vocal opponent, murder being a capital crime, Ostler got Riel hung without fomenting open rebellion. The issue of Riel's hanging still rankles many French Canadians. Ostler was described in at least one newspaper as the best crowned attorney in Ontario. The Welter-Hendershott trial took place in the Elgin County Courthouse between March 7th and 14th, 1895. The trial was reported in newspapers from San Francisco to New York, often conspicuous for their sensationalism and lack of accuracy. The courtroom was filled daily by reporters and interested onlookers. 85 witnesses were called, and an encircling chain of circumstantial evidence was methodically forged by Crown Attorney Osler.
Mr. Osler, call your last witness.
Your Honor, the Crown calls John Wilson Murray to the stand.
My name is John Wilson Murray. I have been the appointed detective for the province of Ontario's Justice Department for over 20 years now.
In your opinion, Mr. Murray, was young Hendershott's death caused by a falling tree?
No, sir. I do not believe the young man was killed by a falling tree. I believe that William Henry Hendershott was murdered.
Please explain to the court your reasons for believing why young Hendershott was murdered.
When I arrived at the area where the young man had been killed, I asked Mr. Welter to show me the exact spot where the boy had lain dead. I then asked Mr. Welter to lay face down in the same spot under the tree. I noticed a large knot on the tree directly above Mr. Welter's head. I asked the doctor with me to take notice of this. I thanked Mr. Welter and asked him please get up. I then asked the doctor, if a man got hit on the head by a falling tree, would there not be a lot of blood? The doctor agreed that there certainly would be, and we set out examining the soil and found no blood. We did find blood on the knot of the tree, but it had been smeared on and not splattered, as it would have been if someone had been killed by a falling tree. How do you explain that, Mr. Welter? As I said, there was no blood found in the soil under the tree. I began to move around the tree in ever-widening circles, and at about 190 feet out from the stump of the tree, I noticed some spots of blood and a zigzag trail of blood drips leading to a place where I discovered a large amount of blood. I determined that this was where the young man died. Further searching uncovered a bloodied axe. I believe that young Hendershott was killed by that very same axe that felled the tree.
Mr. Murray, whose hands were upon the axe that took young Hendershott's life?
The hands were those of William David Welter.
What could possibly be the motive for killing such a likable, friendly boy, Mr. Murray?
During my investigation, I discovered that a very large insurance policy had been taken out on the unknowing boy.
Could you tell us, please, Mr. Murray, who the insurance policy's beneficiary was?
The policy was in the name of John Hendershott, the young man's trusted uncle.
That's all. Thank you, Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Osler.
A guilty verdict was likely, but not assured given local sympathies and the final address by Justice Meredith to the jury. But the jury found them both guilty. The sentence was pronounced by Justice Meredith. Meredith entertained no stays of execution, despite the overtures of defense barrister MacDonald to revisit key evidence. Norma MacDonald, John A. Hendershott's daughter, Mary Lilly, and the Reverend David Spencer, the spiritual advisor to the convicted murderers, continued to make representations to the federal cabinet to commute the sentences to life imprisonment. But after having placed Meredith in the position of Chief Justice, it would have been impolitic for the cabinet to entertain such a reversal when Meredith had adamantly refused further reviews. The men were executed by Canada's hard-drinking hangman at the time, John Radcliffe, renowned for his skill in the deadly art. The hangings were one of only 2 double executions in Canada, and the last performed in St. Thomas jail yard. The bodies were not buried in the family's graveyard, but rather within the confines of the jail yard itself. The graves were rediscovered in 2010 when the courthouse underwent an expansion. No relatives came forward to claim them, and they were reinterred in the West Avenue Cemetery in St. Thomas, well removed from other Welters and Hendershotts, including Hendershott's 2 daughters and his wife, Sarah Elizabeth.
This is a tale of murder, morally repulsive murder, parricidal, bloody murder committed in the most gruesome of manners. It was premeditated, calculated murder for financial gain. Nothing worse has happened out of fiction. It's a terrible crime, and it has a fearful expiration.